This is Court Watch with Alex Swoyer, and I'm excited to bring you the latest episode of my podcast, where I am joined by Curt Levey, President of the Committee for Justice. He'll discuss the Supreme Court's recent arguments in the birthright citizenship case and weigh in on what he thinks the justices will do with the issue of nationwide injunctions, which the Trump administration has challenged. The case came to the court after states and individuals sued the Trump administration after the president moved to end birthright citizenship. That is where a baby born on U.S. soil gets automatic citizenship, even when a parent is not a citizen and is here either visiting or illegally. The lower courts issued nationwide injunctions blocking the order from taking effect while the legal battle plays out over whether the president's order violates the Constitution. But the Trump DOJ took the case to the justices, challenging the ability of a district court judge to block a nationwide policy. Hey, Curt, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me about the latest developments at the court. I know June is probably going to be very, very busy as we get some of these major rulings. But first, I wanted to pick your brain on the big arguments that just took place with the birthright citizenship case. I wasn't sure, I guess, the issue they took up is over this nationwide injunction issue. Does a lower court judge have this authority? Do you think we get a square, pointed answer on that from the justices' direction for these lower court judges, or do you think they skip over that and try to just address birthright citizenship? What do you think we have based on what you heard at arguments?
Well, you're right. I mean, it could be very narrow, and they could just address nationwide injunctions with regard to birthright citizenship. I think that given how controversial and impactful these nationwide injunctions have become, that the court will probably want to rule more broadly than that. They're not going to, reach the merits of birthright citizenship, but I think they will reach the merits of nationwide injunctions. Whether it'll be a clear standard, they really seem torn. On the one hand, I think the majority of them, possibly including Kagan, realize that nationwide injunctions have become too numerous and a real problem, where you can seek, for example, you can file 10 suits, and if you win one that enjoins the whatever the executive order is, then that, in a sense, negates the 9 victories the government might have had. So it's sort of nonsensical. On the other hand, the justices were clearly struggling with, what's the alternative?
Yeah, they were.
Certainly class actions were discussed.
I'll just jump in. One of the things you were pointing out is if you, bring all these lawsuits, but you just lose, it would just take one judge to issue a nationwide injunction. The thing is with this one, it seems like the administration was getting them across the board, right? It was like these rulings were only really going one way, and it was against the Trump administration, which questions the vehicle that the administration decided to bring this issue before the justices, I guess.
Yeah, one could certainly argue that this was not the best vehicle for the nationwide injunction issue. 3 district courts, ruled against the administration, but I'm not sure that tells us, gives us maybe a little clue as to what the result on the merits would be, but it's certainly doesn't make it as clear as some people are saying that the court will strike down the administration's interpretation of birthright citizenship. So I think we'll probably get some sort of muddy middle standard, since the justices see there's a problem, but also are struggling with what's the alternative. Mm-hmm. But I do think it'll be broader than just applying to birthright citizenship.
What about, so today is Thursday, May 22nd. We're recording. I'm probably going to put this podcast out early next week. So just so our audience knows, today the Supreme Court did issue a ruling in a separate case. It was the dispute that I've talked about previously, dealing with the state of Oklahoma, and it was basically a religious Catholic charter school that wanted to open. And it divided Republicans in the state. I think the governor was for it. The AG was not. He said it entangled basically this public school funds for charter schools with religion, because this Catholic school would incorporate its Catholic teaching in its curriculum. And so the lower court, this Oklahoma Supreme Court, had ruled for the AG, right? Against the school opening and against this religious charter school. And so we didn't really get a decision from the court. We did, but we didn't get an opinion. They ended up saying 4-4, basically a divided Supreme Court, because Justice Barrett had recused. affirmed the lower court ruling, and we didn't get any analysis or anything. What do you make of that? Will the issue come back to this? Is that basically their way of like letting the issue come back?
Yeah, I think the issue will come back. It's binding in this particular case now, the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision, but it doesn't set any precedent. So I think the issue is going to come back. I mean, we've, had a number of cases involving, whether government can exclude a religious school from funding that it otherwise provides. And it was just seemed like a natural extension that we would have this debate about charter schools. And I think sometime in the next few years, it will come back to the Supreme Court. And the decision or lack of decision was not particularly surprising. I know coming out of oral argument, everyone sensed that, it would come down to Roberts. And Roberts, apparently, we don't know for sure, but apparently was the fourth justice along with the three liberals to say that it was unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
So
he did. He said there was a remark he made during oral arguments about like when you were talking about those other cases about, public funds and not being, they can't be withheld basically from religious organizations on the account of the discrimination claim. He kind of said, well, aren't those other cases a little like the issue of charter schools is a bit more complex is the word I think he may have used.
Yeah, it's more complex. I mean, the state involvement is broader. I think he, referred to those other cases as being more discreet. But, when I was listening to the oral argument, it sort of drove home to me that, we think of it as, are you a state actor or are you not a state actor? But it's really kind of a spectrum. Charter schools really are sort of in this middle ground of being
they get state money, but they
public schools,
right.
But they are, but in many ways, private. So it's a difficult question.
Exactly. They don't have the same oversight, I was going to say. Although they get the state funds, I don't think have the same necessarily oversight as what we do, with like the traditional public schools.
They certainly have more independence.
Mm-hmm.
Less independence than private schools, but more independence than public schools, which is why it's a difficult case to decide.
What other cases are you really watching this term? We expect the term to wrap up in June. They've been known to go into the first week of July, but usually they, leave that July, August, September for their recess. So what are some, like maybe your top three that you're monitoring, waiting for opinions?
I would say Scrimetti, basically involving a Tennessee law that says you can't do gender-affirming treatment for kids who think they're transgender or their parents think they're transgender.
Mm-hmm.
Free Speech Coalition involving a Texas law that requires age verification for adult sites. And then Ames versus Ohio, which involves an issue that I think is very much at the forefront these days, which is whether to prove what people call reverse discrimination, and other people don't like that term, but I think people know what it means,
mm-hmm.
whether there's a higher standard.
I think that case involved, wasn't it like a heterosexual white woman and then she had twice been demoted or whatnot because she was replaced with like a gay
and denied first denied a promotion, then demoted.
And it was like her supervisor was gay and the people replacing her were all gay, I think is one of the fact pattern.
I don't know if her supervisor was gay, but the people replacing her were gay.
Yeah, I'd have to look back, but it was something to that effect. You mentioned the transgender case. That one was one where when I was at the court, it was packed. Like it used to be during, before COVID, it was just always packed because they only put the transcripts out of the hearings and then you got audio like later in the week. Now things are kind of live streamed. I think less people come to the court so they can hear it. They can live stream the audio. But that one was one.
Probably, I'm going to guess, bad news for, I know they at least used to have people who for a fee would stand online for you.
Right. So, I haven't seen that as much. Yeah. But the press section, I mean, like there's some seats that are totally like behind the curtains that you only really hear the justices, you don't get to see. And like they used to be on big cases filled, but now they really aren't. And I think Scrimetti was the only one I recall like where it was like it used to be where you had, and that was the one about the transgender, the Tennessee law banning transgender treatment, medical treatment for youth, and that was filled. So I tend to think, just based on that, like the interest, that might be like at the top of the list, along maybe with this birthright citizenship issue that people are really monitoring. But
yeah, if you're talking about producing headlines, then yeah.
What about, and I haven't covered this, so you're going to have to fill in the gaps here. I had a colleague who was covering some of this transgender debate, and really like in the States and what's going on. And there was it a Massachusetts lawmaker that went to the Supreme Court, because I believe she was, Maine. Okay. Tell me what happened there and what the latest decision was. I know the Supreme Court issued an order, I think it was earlier this week.
Right. You had a Maine legislator who posted a picture of a transgender student who competed as a woman in I think it was high school sporting event. And the Speaker of the House said that she was endangering transgender people, asked her to take the post down. She refused. They censored her, which in the Maine House has the effect of denying her the right to take part in floor debates, and to vote. So basically, it implicates the First Amendment and also the right of the citizens in her district to be represented.
Mm-hmm.
And the Supreme Court basically, they came to the teacher, and some of her constituents came to the Supreme Court asking for an emergency injunction, and that was granted on Monday. And, again, it doesn't go to the merits in the sense that the case still needs to be litigated in the courts below, and will, may well come back to the Supreme Court at some point.
Yeah.
But at least the teacher has temporary relief.
So now it's about, I guess it was seen kind of as a, would you say like at least the order is viewed as kind of like a First Amendment victory, I guess, or is that taking it too far?
Yeah, I know. That was certainly one of the arguments raised, along with the right of the people in the district to be represented. But I would say it's mostly a First Amendment issue. That's certainly how it'll be viewed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me ask you my last question, which I think I've talked about how many lawsuits the Trump administration is facing. It's just it's wild, the number. Stephen Dinan and I have been covering as much as we can of this. He does mostly the lower courts, and I kind of jump in with this what's going on once it gets higher. He has on his count roughly 400 lawsuits that have been filed against the Trump agenda. That includes sometimes some of these these individuals suing over their visas, students, and all that. But the DOJ seems, he said, to be losing from his observation in the lower courts due to basically being stretched too thin. He, in conversations with me, has talked about like the missing of deadlines, for example, or like not being, I guess, thoroughly prepared to be able to represent what the clients were doing, like the movement of planes or the issues related to, I think it was one of the deportation cases, basically like, referencing like needing to communicate with the client, which it would be DHS, I would assume. Just kind of like this observation of DOJ kind of spinning its wheels. My question for you is, did the administration move too far or like go too far too fast that the DOJ can't keep up? Or do they need to hire more attorneys? Like, does the Trump administration need to fill some of these, I guess, vacancies at the DOJ? Or what do you think the solution to this is?
Well, the Justice Department, or really the administration, is moving quickly, but I think that's a good thing. I don't think they knew that the left would bombard them with these lawsuits. I don't know that they realized there would be literally hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't.
I saw on that point. I saw just the ACLU alone had a press release that it has sued the administration. I think it's like 121 times.
And yeah, they're very proud of it. The left is definitely they don't control either house of Congress or the presidency. They're certainly trying to use the court
mm-hmm.
to stop Trump, and partly because of these nationwide injunctions, their forum shopping has been very effective. I think that's a big part of the reason why they've lost more than they've won. Although certainly being overwhelmed and understaffed is a factor as well. But again, it's hard to blame the Justice Department since, this really is a function of just all-out assault by the left.
Right. The lawfare, I guess you and I have talked a lot about.
Yeah. And again, what's the solution? I don't know that there is one. I mean, it takes certainly months to hire new attorneys at DOJ, and that assumes they can find people who are experienced litigators. So, that might be a long-term solution, but I think they're going to continue to be overwhelmed in the short term. But again, I don't think it's their fault.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable. I always tell people, and I think they think I'm just kind of nerdy, but I've never seen the courts become, I guess, it's just become such a political battleground. It's just the politics seem to be taking over the judiciary. It's just always been sad when you can look at a judge a lot of times and have an idea of how they're going to rule. And
again, the left is very good at doing this. Certainly conservative judges have their biases, but they don't have the same sweeping view of a judge's powers. They're not judicial activists the way that judges on the left are. And the left is very good at identifying those judges and bringing the suits in the right districts and the right circuit. Mm-hmm. And, that forum shopping is a big part of the reason why they're having a lot of success. And also, getting back to the beginning of our conversation, a reason why the Supreme Court probably will, to some extent, rein in these nationwide injunctions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Curt, for taking time to chat with me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be calling you all throughout the month of June to get your take as we get some of these big cases.
I look forward to chatting more.
Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet to this podcast, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.